As the photo editor, you're like everything. You're not just the editor, you're doing research, you're helping get permissions. You're the person on the phone when they're lonely, you're their psychologist, their best friend, their teacher, their boss. And I would look at every single picture they photographed. That was one of the National Geographic's claims to fame. If they shot 10,000 images, I'd look at 10,000 images and edit. And as a former photographer, I could really understand very deeply the challenges, the long days, everything about it. I think that helped me a lot to becoming a better editor.
Greetings and welcome back to the show. If you ever look back at your own photos and wondered what they're really trying to tell you, you're in the right place. I'm Tom Jacob and this is the Camera Cafe Show. Today I'm joined by photographer, mentor and editor Sarah Leen, a longtime National Geographic contributor who went on to become the magazine's first female director of photography before returning what she loves most, working directly with photographers and their stories. In our conversation today, folks, we trace her journey from the early days in photojournalism and her years in the field to shaping some of the most iconic visual storytelling at National Geographic, and now to her work as a photo book editor, teacher, and mentor to the next generation. We talk about editing as a kind of a visual puzzle, about learning to trust your instincts, about notebooks, gardens, and the long process of making sense of your own archive. There's a lot of wisdom here, and of course a lot of laughter too. So grab a coffee, settle in, and let's get into it with the wonderful Sarah Leen. Good midday to you, Sarah, and welcome on the podcast. It's a pleasure to see you and to have a little chat about photography and a bit about your life too.
Thank you, Tom, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's going to be an amazing talk. Sarah, in our last talk we had a while ago, you mentioned you still needed to plant like 250 daffodil bulbs in your garden. You managed to find time for this or not?
No, yes, I found it was time for it. But it's probably one of the reasons my back is hurting too, because of all those bulbs. It's worth it for this when the spring comes.
Mm-hmm. I remember you were going to send me a picture of your garden.
Oh, I need to do that. I have to find one from the spring or summer. But yes, I will find you one. I'm going to write that down right now.
So now I see you writing something down. It's funny because I just talked to Nancy Borowick some days ago.
Yeah.
And by the way, she gives you many, many greetings.
Oh, yeah.
She also had to write something down and she actually, just like you, took a lot of papers. So you are not digital in writing things down, Sarah?
Oh, sometimes, but just for my desk, at my desk, I have a notebook. And I like to keep a little list here that's always facing me. So if I don't remember, I say yes, probably too much. So I like to do all kinds of things. So if somebody asks me to do something, often I'll say yes. So if I don't write it down, like right here on my desk, I can see it. I can forget. And then somebody will contact me and say, you said you were going to do this. And I'll be like, So I have to write it down. But I do take some notes if I'm in a meeting, more of a meet somebody, and I have many meetings with them, like mentoring or something. Then I have a Word document and notes on that Word document while we're talking, so that I can go back and see what we talked about and what we've done. So, yeah. Are you entirely digital? Do you make a paper list?
No, I'm not entirely digital. I actually really enjoy holding paper in my hands. Also, books. I cannot seem to buy a digital book.
Yeah. Oh, I buy digital books like for novels and nonfiction books, just for reading without photos. I buy digital because I want to spend my money all on photography books. So the bigger money. So I just write digital books or get them from the library, digital books.
in Spain for the moment, National Geographic magazine has like an amazing offer for the next 2 years, but I'm not sure if it's digital, if I'm going really to enjoy it. So I don't know. I really like to hold it in my hands and go through it.
Yes. I get both. I get the print copy because I agree. I want to see also the design of how
Mhm.
because I'm interested in editing. So I like to see the edit and the design, how they put it together. But I also have like a digital subscription. So if I want to look something up, especially the digital subscription you have access to the archives through the
Mhm.
digital subscription. So for me, it's worth it because then I can go back and look at something from a long time ago if I want to.
Mhm. And you can find friends back there inside. Even we will talk about this in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So Sarah, East Boot Bay, you've seen a lot of the world. You went on your assignment years from Africa to Siberia. What's about the pace of life in Maine that keeps you happy?
It's the nature. One of the things why I love Maine is being in nature more. I also love Maine for the people. There's a strong arts and photography community in Maine. It has been like for a couple 100 years. Lots of painters came up here for the summer and painted because it's so beautiful and the summers are so nice. It has this arts tradition and a lot of what you call makers, lots of people who come here and they make pottery or they do textiles. It's a large maker community and there's less big cities. There's less sameness. So, in America, we have a lot of what we call franchises or chain restaurants. So like McDonald's and those kind, Dunkin' Donuts or something, and they're everywhere. So you can fly into St. Louis, Missouri and be presented with all the same things that where you just left if in America. And here you don't have that. There's lots smaller amount of the things. So restaurants, bookstores, everything is like more individual. There's like a restaurant here in West Bay Harbor that we like to go to. That's it. There's just one of them. You're not going to find it anywhere but right here. So I think I like that. I like, and where I live, it's very in the woods, but it's still close to, say, the grocery store and things like that. But when you're here, you can feel like you're far away. I spent 15, at least 15 years living in the city in Washington, D.C., and then in other larger towns. And so it's nice to just do something entirely different, be somewhere entirely different.
Sarah, let's walk a bit back. Teenage years, you were at home the rebel wearing a mini skirt, or you just did everything your parents told you to do?
Oh, good. Let me think back. I think I did some of both, right? Because my parents were pretty strict, but once I got out of the house, sometimes I would even change my clothes. So I would wearing one thing, have clothes that I wore out and then change back before I got home. Like I was sneaky, you know?
Mhm.
And, but the huge emphasis in our family was on education. That was the thing. And that's where I did what they told me to do because it was just expected that you would do well in school. There was and, uh, and study, and you would study, but I liked it. That wasn't a problem for me. I loved learning and new things. I love to read. I loved making things like in the art classes. I loved history. I loved all school and college and everything. I'm still love learning and want to always keep learning and studying in a way. So that wasn't a problem for me. But I was fairly rebellious once I got to college. had a couple of few years there before I settled down.
But then, Sarah, you did very well in college because you went to study photojournalism at University of Missouri and 1979 College Photographer of the Year.
Yeah, I was in I got a Bachelor of Arts in Fine Art and minored in art history. So I was very interested in art right away. When I graduated from college, undergraduate, I didn't have any skills where you could get a job. I was like an artist. But I started then with photography a little bit. They got a photography teacher my second year in the program, and I was doing printmaking, and I needed to take some photos because I wanted to transfer prints onto metal plates and make etchings. So I had to learn some photography. Then we got a photography professor, and I started going that way, and I loved it. But I was doing all kinds of cross processes and gum by chromate printing and 4x5 photography, thinking maybe I was going to be Ansel Adams. But when I graduated, I didn't really know how to do photography professionally. You know, I started dating a guy who worked for the local newspaper, who was a photographer for the newspaper, who was already also in college. And I saw, wow, you could have a job doing this. We could, and you can go everywhere. And you can have an excuse to talk to anybody and go anywhere because now you're going to go take pictures. So then I went back to school and in journalism. And then that's when the flame burst in mind. And I went to they had a thing called the Flying Short course, where they would take a group of photographers and they would take a week and they would go to different cities. So they would go to New York and they would go to Kansas City and they'd go to LA. And this group would do a presentation everywhere they landed. And it was like this whirlwind. I did it once later, but I went as a student to the one in Kansas City, and Eddie Adams was speaking. And he was talking about being a photographer, and he said, if you want to be a photographer, you need to ask yourself, how bad do you want this? He says, because you're going to have to give some things up. You might not be home for Christmas. You might not be there when your children are first taking their steps. You might not have good relationships. You might, blah, blah, et cetera. I sat there and I thought, okay, I want this bad. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to sacrifice if I need to. And that's when I really went for it. I wanted to be a real photographer and work as a photojournalist. And those kind of were some big turning points for me in terms of settling down, focusing, committing, learning the skills, and photographing. Learn to photograph seriously and learning about storytelling and journalism, et cetera.
And that also gave you the internship at National Geographic.
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Yeah.
But at the University of Missouri Journalism School, there was a lot, at the time, fairly many of the National Geographic photographers some of them had come through that school. Jody Cobb had gone through the school, David Allen Harvey, William Garrett, who was the editor-in-chief of the magazine at the time. They had all gone through this program. And so sometimes they would come during the Pictures of the Year contest, and they would come for that. So we got to meet some of the photographers and the editors. And it was a real privilege. I got to know Robert Gilka, who was the director of photography at the time. And I knew that every year they had the contest, the College Photographer of the Year contest. And at the time, the prize was an internship at the magazine. For the 2 years that I was in that program, I applied and I got it that last year in my program. And yeah, that was the beginning of everything for me in terms of
Everything. Yeah.
NASA. Yeah, it was a huge blessing that I was able to get that opportunity.
Because you even made your first story there, Sarah, no? Return to
Mhm.
Uganda while
Yeah,
you were there.
yeah. That was. I was a bit of a disaster though when I first went on that because I had mostly been doing black and white photography through school, and we had one little course on color, and it's all back then. The Geographic, it was all transparency slide film. It was Kodachrome,
Mhm.
and Kodachrome was like Kodachrome 64 ASA too. And
Mhm.
Kodachrome is very fussy. It's like the latitude
Mhm.
between a good exposure and a bad exposure is very narrow. And this really dates me, but when I first went there, I think that was the first year, so that's 1979, that Nikon came out with a camera that had a light meter in the camera, right? But we were using handheld light meters. And it was, my exposures were terrible. They were just terrible. And they were like, wait a minute. Then I think Bob Milka said to me, you're obviously a good printer because my black and white looked good for my portfolio. So they've got me a Nikon FE that had a light meter in the camera, which changed my life.
Mhm. Of course.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then I got a magazine assignment, my first magazine assignment to go to Uganda with a family, husband, wife, and their child. They were Canadian. She was Ugandan. He was Canadian. And they were going back after the end of Idi Amin, who was the dictator, and he'd been overthrown. And so they were able to go back, and she hadn't seen her family in 6 or 7 years, Jerry and Sarah Cambides. And so I went with them. And boy, I had a lot of tough lessons, really tough lessons. Cause I thought like the big moment was when she saw her family for the first time in 7 years. And I was like, okay, this is so important. I have to get this photo, have to get this photo. And we drove from Kenya into Uganda, and we ended up not getting out of town. There was all complications. So by the time we got there, it was like night, and the family had been all day waiting. And we get there, and it sucks. The light sucks. It's like terrible. I knew I was not going to get a good photo of this. I tried with that transparency film. I wasn't prepared to do any flash or anything. Anyway, I cried so bad. I was so unhappy. I thought, oh, I'm ruined now. And we were there for 2.5 months living in an apartment in Kampala. Anyway, it got better, but I learned some lessons about that
Mhm.
you can't control what's going to
Yeah.
happen, and you have to be the problem solver. It's my job to solve that problem. I can't go crying to Bob Gilka. I mean, I did at first. I would call him if I had a phone, I could get a phone call if I went back to Nairobi. Didn't go that often, but calling his secretary said, you cannot be calling Mr. Gilka. He says, you talk to your editor. So everything, I was just,
Mhm.
I was like so inexperienced, and all the lessons I learned, they helped me a lot
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
understand the difference between being a student and a professional.
Yeah. Maybe Bob Gilka was. Can it be he told you that after the internship to find a real job?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
but he got you a job, yeah,
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
Topeka Journal.
Yes, he did. Yeah, because I'm thinking by the end of this assignment, everything like, I'm ready. Now I'm ready to be a National Geographic photographer. And he had to give me a reality check. You know, I don't think so. And
Mhm,
basically he says, no, you need to go get a job. He said, you need to get out there and
mhm,
get a job. Because I wasn't quite done with my master's in journalism and I was going to go back to school. And he says, no, you need to go get a job. And Rich Clark's at the Topeka Capital Journal and they were friends. They had a very robust photo staff for this Kansas newspaper. And they won a lot of contests and stuff like that.
mhm,
And
mhm,
and they had just a photographer or had left and gone on somewhere else. And
mhm,
so he knew there was an opening and he called Rich and got me the job there. And that was really, I was there about 2 years. And that was, I think that was where I really became a professional. Yeah.
learned. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything, all the assignments, incredible staff. You had Jim Richardson on you've
Mhm,
done Jim Richardson before, and he
yeah,
was on the staff
mhm,
and he helped me so much. And Chris Johns, who became the chief of the
mhm,
magazine at one point, he's the one who hired me as a photo editor. They were all there. So it was quite a heck of a staff. And that's where you really learn to be a professional, like taking
mhm,
responsibility, figuring it out, doing the work, coming up with
mhm,
ideas, pitching ideas. We all pitched ideas. Yeah, it was great. It was
mhm.
tough, but it was great.
Sarah, I sent an email to Jim and I told him I'm going to talk with Sarah Leen and I'm going to ask you for the funniest moment you guys had on the newspaper. And he says,
Oh,
fine, go with it. So there you go, Sarah. What was the best moment with Jim Richardson?
oh, I not so much that it was funny, but I was so Topeka, Kansas is the capital city for Kansas, the state of Kansas. And the legislature comes and meets for 3 months of the year. And they always assign a photographer to be there full time. Like for 3 months of the year, that's all you do is you go up to the Capitol and you cover all the Senate and the House and all the committee meetings and everything. And so Rich decided that I would do it. I did this
Mhm,
year. When I first got there, I got there like in December or something, and it started in January. And and I'm like, what? This is like meetings and meetings, and I was like, how am I gonna? This this sounds awful. And there had been
mhm,
a man who had done it, Bern Ketchum. He was no longer on the staff, but he had done it for several years and had put together like a slideshow that he gave to people. And he gave it to me because I went and talked to him. He gave it to me to study, to look at. And oh, I
mhm,
must have looked at that thing 50 times. That slideshow. I'd just put it, I was sitting home and I'd go through it. And I could start to see something like a glimmer of hope. The way he photographed it, it was all about the people, and the people in the audience, as well as the actual legislators. And he brought so much
mhm,
humanity to it, to the story of, here's what government looks like. And so I got totally into it, right? I got,
mhm,
I did it 2 years. I said, oh no, I'm doing it again. I got so into it. And I got to know everybody in the legislature. They all knew me and I could go anywhere I wanted and do whatever I wanted. And it was great. It was really great. Yeah. So the first day we went at the legislature, Jim came with me
mhm,
because they had to have a picture for the front page, right? And they couldn't really trust me yet, like if I could get it. So he came with me to make sure they had something for the paper the next day because that's a big deal. The legislature opens. So he did that, and then which was great. And he gave me a lot of confidence. I can't remember if they used one of mine or one of his. They probably used some of both of ours for that day because they did a whole page of pictures. Then I had an assignment or I had to go photograph something at night. And I didn't really know how to use lighting at all.
mhm,
And Jim took his time to to get a flash, explain how to use this flash, like off camera, holding it off, bouncing it off walls and stuff like that. We shot a test roll, processed the test roll, looked at it. He was like my teacher those
mhm.
first few months and so helpful, so generous. I will never forget that how he helped me. He helped me become a professional. In terms of the funny or jokes. A lot of stuff happened before I came that were like legend of, of the bad boys on the staff doing bad boy stuff and getting in trouble. Yeah.
So Sarah, then a bit quick forwards.
Huh?
Then you worked for some year at newspapers.
Huh?
You changed to freelancing, I think, because you always wanted to work for National Geographic. You end up making 16 stories for them
Mhm.
in that time. And then in 2005, a job position came open.
Yeah. An editor position came open. And I had during that time while I was making photographs for the magazine, doing magazine stories, while it was amazing, I had some incredible stories that got to work on. I was also teaching workshops, actually up here in Maine at this media college, workshops. And when I was teaching those workshops, I realized how much I liked working with photographers on their projects, editing and helping coach them and stuff like that. So I always thought in the back of my mind, maybe someday I'll be an editor. I might switch to becoming an editor because one of the things about me as a photographer was I was very nervous and always thought like this was that I had done a terrible job, right? I just thought every story I did, it was terrible and that was it. And they were never going to hire me again. And my career was like done. That didn't happen, but I was like the kind of known for that. There's always like a disaster. So walking around feeling like that is not the pleasantest feeling, right? It's not a good feeling to have, feeling like you just weren't good enough and et cetera. But when I was teaching and I was working with other photographers with their film, I didn't feel that way. I felt good. I felt, oh, I can help this person. You know, and I felt confident of my ability to edit and sequence and storytelling. I felt good. So that's why I thought about it as like a possible future. So when the opening came up at the magazine, back in those days, nobody left. It was rare that a photo editor left and went someplace else. So I applied. I thought, I'm just going to apply. I was working on a story at the time. I thought, I'm just going to apply, see what happens. Because I knew Chris, because from Topeka, and he was the one who was going to make the decision. And I thought, if anybody would take a chance on me as an editor, it's going to be Chris. And so I got the job. I finished my story and I started editing and never looked back. And I loved it. I loved editing, still do, still doing it, still love it. Yeah. You close one door and another one opens, and you just have to be willing to go through it.
Then you worked on numerous magazine features.
Yeah.
It says Lynn Johnson, Erica Larson, John Stanmeyer, Joel Sartore, and again Jim Richardson, and many others. How did it feel, Sarah, to represent their work and then to project this to the editor-in-chief?
Yeah.
What's the process there? How you have to defend it?
So the way it worked then, and it's not exactly the same now, but the way it worked then, you would be by the director of the department, director of photography department, you would be assigned a story, and usually the photographer came with it. The photographer was already chosen for this story. In some cases, it wasn't, and then you were welcome to suggest somebody. I really like to do. That was one of the things I wanted to do very badly was work with new photographers, because working with the photographers like Jim or Joel Sartore, or the ones that were photographers when I was a photographer, they were like my peers. And all of a sudden now I'm their editor. And I think that was more difficult than working with new photographers who I didn't have a previous relationship with them as a photographer, right? I was just an editor. So I leaned into working with the newer photographers or suggesting new photographers. And Chris and I had this great relationship. So I would show him photographers' work and say, what do you think about this person? they're doing this project. I think it'd be perfect for us. So I was able to get a lot of new people. And that was, I think that was the best for me, probably the best for those photographers who I didn't knew previously too. But so as the photo editor, you're like everything. You're not just the editor, you're doing research, you're helping get permissions for the photographers to go do things if that's needed. You're there, you're the person on the phone when they're sad or lonely or something. You're the person, you're their psychologist, their best friend, their teacher, their boss. You control the budget. We make the budget. So the photographer and I, they're assigned early at the beginning, and we would make a proposal to the executive committee about here's the story that we are going to tell and where we're going to go. And here's our proposed budget. And it's 1 trip, 2 trips, whatever we felt like it needed. And there'd be a whole team. We'd be working, not just me and the photographer to do this, but there's the text editor and the writer and everything. So we'd make a plan, and then they would photograph. They would they would send in all their film, everything, all of it. Early on, it was processed in-house. They had a whole darkroom, the color process in-house, and then that changed later and it was processed outside. And I would look at every single picture they photographed. That was one of the National Geographic's claims to fame was if they shot 10,000 images, I'd look at 10,000 images and edit. But one of the really amazing things about doing that in terms of a photographer is I am in their shoes. I see exactly how they move their body. I see when they start. I see when they stop. I see when they move in or when they walk away. And so you can really understand how they're thinking and see. And then you can see patterns, like certain compositions they always go back to, repeating patterns and stuff. So it's really, I love that part of it, that I got to see everything. And then I could say to them, I think you stopped maybe too soon, stay a little longer. Or I was hoping you would see something that was going on in the background. And then when you did, I was so excited because you went over there and took that photo. And so as a former photographer, I could really understand very deeply the challenges, the long days, everything about it. And so I think that helped me a lot to becoming a good editor, a better editor, and helpful for them. Yeah, it was. And then we would show it. We would make an edit. They usually do a halfway look because back then, the stories were really long. You had months. You could have months. And so you'd make an edit halfway and make a sequence and make a slideshow. And then the executive committee and the writer and the graphics people and if anybody's going to make a map, everybody comes together and we would show the work. But what was key about this was the photographer would sit there and narrate the story. So they would learn, and I think this was so great for the photographers because they learned how to talk about their photographs. They learned how to tell the story with the photos, which for me as a photographer, having gone through the same thing, was so helpful for me and also I think made me eventually a better teacher because you have to be able to explain the story, the visuals, like what is this photo doing in terms of telling the story and the next one and the next one. And we would practice the photographers, especially if they hadn't done it very much, that they would practice what say, because you had to do it in a certain amount of time. You can't just get on one picture and sit there forever going, talking. It has to be like soundbite because you might show 50 photos. And I had my assistant was Elena, and Elena was my person who she always would be the first one to hear the photographer tell the story. do it. Like I would work on it with them, but then I would give them Elena because Elena doesn't know that much about the story. She doesn't know. And so she would sit with them and be the viewer, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and then give them tips and help them. And it was like, she was great too. She was fantastic. And everybody was like Elena boot camp. Sarah boot camp was the edit and
Mm-hmm.
Elena boot camp was the presentation. So it was great. And then we'd
Mm-hmm.
show them how much money we spent and everything. And then they would go back and we would do the same exact thing at the end, the final show.
We already talked about this, about explaining, because of course, one thing when the photographer shows you a picture is what he wants you to see. And another thing is really, I guess, what really the picture tells.
100%. Yeah. I see that a lot. It's very common that, what it's, for me, it's the difference between the photograph speaking in a visual language versus the text. And speech is like text. So if you're telling me about this photo and you're telling me like a meaning that what this photograph means in terms of the story, or you're telling me about a bigger idea, but it's not actually in the photo, then I like to make the difference. So that's the text or that's the caption, and which should add information that's not in there. The text should add information. Text has a very big importance for any sort of magazine storytelling, for sure. But the picture has to speak. I want to look at the whole thing without any text or any explanation and understand what the story is. I should be able to understand. That's when the pictures are doing what their job. And also, I will understand it emotionally, not just information. There's emotion and information. They're not necessarily the same things. Sometimes they can be. There can be information and text that's very emotional, but pictures are definitely speaking in a whole nother language. It's like hieroglyphics or something. They don't speak
Mm-hmm.
the way we speak. They speak different. And you need to understand that language to
Yeah.
really tell visual stories. What's it doing?
I will pick back on this when we talk about your workshops. But then, 2013, you became first female director of photography, National Geographic.
Yes.
Tell me a bit, what's the main difference there between being a senior photo editor and being director of photography?
Oh, you don't get to really edit stories anymore, right? Do a little bit, just a couple. But so now you're the boss of a staff. I probably had, when I started out, about 30 people, 35 people that were on the staff, because I had the Yellow Border magazine, I had Traveler magazine, I had the studio photographers, all the photo editing staff, and then you have all the freelance photographers. So, and the budget, you have to make the budget work.
Yeah.
And then contracts. And during the period of time that I was DOP, the society sold the media part of National Geographic to 21st Century Fox, right? So we had new owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be TV, magazines, books, expeditions, trips, commercial trips, et cetera. So that became for profit, and we had been nonprofit. So now we had people who did movies and had television shows, and they had ESPN magazine and ABC. So that was their little corner where they had journalism. And so they had very different ideas about a magazine like ours. And they were thrilled to be part of National Geographic. And they were really nice people. But the contracts, it was a lot of transition. We had all new people to work with. And so that was a little stressful, especially things about contracts. And they didn't really understand editorial photography. It's not commercial photography, and there's a big difference. So I was managing people. You have to write performance reviews. You have to do budget meetings. I was at a seat at the top table, though, with the editor in chief and everybody. I was like the last word on every story in terms of quality control and did I like it? Or do I think things should maybe change? And I approved every photographer that was going to work on a story. So I had a lot of influence that way on who's in the magazine, what the stories look like. That for me was the best part of the job, was that help find stories, help bring new people in, even more than when I was an editor, and get the quality control, and that I was seeing the editor in chief every day and working with her and coming up with ideas for whole issues and stories. And I in on every story when the photographers or the photo editor came in to present the idea for the story. I was at that table now. So it was a huge honor, number one. And it was really, taught me a lot. But one of the things that kind of taught me in the long run was I didn't want to be a manager. I, I, I didn't, it can be very stressful. And I wanted to work with the creative people. I wanted to make things and I wanted to edit. That's where I felt was my strongest skill, was editing, working with photographers, and management was not really my strongest skill. So I feel like, we won a lot of awards for the magazines, for photography, these national magazine awards. We won a bunch of awards for photography during that period of time. So we were doing a wonderful job. But then when they transitioned again, where 21st Century Fox was selling to Disney, it was going to be a whole nother thing, a whole nother one of these big changes. And I just felt like I don't want to do it again. I don't want to do that again. And I was thinking more and more about how I was missing editing. I wanted to be the editor and I teach. I wanted to do workshops again. I hadn't really been teaching workshops much while I was full time. I just didn't have the bandwidth. So I started thinking about a whole new future. And so I did. I left end of 2019 and started up a whole new career and freelancing again.
And here you are,
And
Sarah,
here we
with
are
me to
talking
talk
to
about
you.
this. Yes, this new chapter of your life.
Yes.
So, Sarah, you worked on some pretty amazing photo books by now. Your first criterion when a new photographer sends you his pictures, his work, is it what make the pictures do to you or feel? What will be interesting?
What I love about books is that every book it's so unique. Every book is its own jigsaw puzzle. Like working for a magazine as an editor, you have some structure built in to the storytelling for a magazine. So the magazine is always the same size, so the size of your pages. The designers are the same designers. So they usually have a stable of typefaces. You generally, not always, but you have a certain amount of text. Often you'll most have a map. Most often there's illustrations and graphics and stuff like that. So those are all like given to you. You know that's going to be a story. With a book, what do you want to do? Now, what are you hoping to make? What kind of book do you want to make here? And what's your book about? So there's a lot of conversation about, I like to know if you had all the money in the world, what would be the book that you want to make? Let's see, and then we'll scale. But I like to, I think that every photographer I've ever met just about wants to do a book. It doesn't matter if they just walked out the door of college or they've been in the business for 25 years. They all want to do a book. And of course, it's one of the best ways to display your work besides an exhibition or a gallery show or an installation. But we love books, photographers. So we like the physical nature of it. And we can fall in love with books. I got a room full of books here, photo books, and I love them. And so I think as an editor with a photographer of their book this is their dream. making a book. And I want them to be so happy. I want them to be so happy with their book. That's my
Mhm.
job. And if they're not, I haven't done my job because I want to help them reach their dream. And so we have budgets that we have to take into consideration. That's the biggest limiting factor on a photo book is the budget because they're not cheap. They're not cheap to make. And in this world, in this market, you have to bring some money to the table, unless if you're Sebastian Salgado, probably not. You don't. He does book after book. And anybody would be like, yes, let us publish your book. So if you're famous, a big name, then you don't, I'm not going to say never, but I would imagine that you don't have to bring much money or everybody's in line to give you the money to make your book. A lot of the photographers I work with, this is their first book and they are raising the money unless they find a publisher who is going to, and the publisher will print and distribute and put their name on it. But a lot of them, you have to bring some money. So it's expensive. And so that is like the main limiting factor is the budget on what you want to do. Then you have not a lot of choices to make. The size, the kind of paper, just one kind of paper or two kinds of paper or three kinds of paper. Are you going to have other little things that go into it? Are you going to have pages that are tipped in and, lift off the page? I mean, there's so many possibilities. And for me, the choices around that is serving the story. I'm all about the story. I think everything has a story, even if it's like an art book or art photo book, there's still like some story woven through. So what's the story? What are you trying to say? Who's the audience for your book? Why does it need to be really big or can it be smaller? I think there's a trend with photo books where they're smaller than the used to be. Photo books were always like a big coffee table book and you couldn't look at it unless you had a table.
Mhm.
To hold it. You couldn't just sit there and have it in your hands and look at it. And
Yeah.
now there's
Mhm.
beautiful books that are smaller. So there's a range now. They're not all huge, which I think is better. I think it's more intimate. The experience
Mhm.
is and when you can hold it easier. Uh, yeah, but I think that my first thing is like, what is the story? And what is your goal? And who do you want to see this? And a lot of the photographers I work with want to make some kind of impact with their work. They want to change the world or they want to educate people about something or elevate a topic that you need to know about. You need to see this. So there's a lot of passion involved with the photographers when they're making their book. It's really important for me to understand all that, to
Mhm.
do a proper edit. And then for me, it's like looking, and it's always been with editing, it's like, what impact, what do I see? And what is it like impacting me aesthetically, for sure, communication, emotion. I say this, and I've said this every time I've talked to anybody, is I like pictures at the intersection of art and journalism. To me, that's
Mhm.
the sweet spot. Because photography is image making, which is an art form. So even if it's photojournalism, you're still dealing with an art form here. So I want pictures that that I look at it and I go, give me that one. I want to put it on my wall. I love this
Mhm.
photo. It must be published. I also, as an editor, when I first started out as an editor, I wanted to be jealous every day I was looking at your pictures. If I wasn't feeling, damn, I wish I could have taken that picture, or I wish I would have seen that way or something. I wanted to be like feeling jealous. So I knew that I had made the right decision becoming an editor because this
Mhm.
person is just kicking it out of the park. They're like rocking it. And I might not have seen that way or been able to do that. But I recognize that you are doing it.
Mhm.
And so I start by, I'm very like highly organized and have all kinds of, I call them buckets that I put photos in by, depending on the book
Mhm.
by sort of issues and types of photos and everything so that I can edit that way. But a lot of I would say pretty much all the photographers I work with come out of photojournalism. But that doesn't mean there's no art in the
Yeah, of
photos.
course.
Uh, and I'm really meddlesome too. I think a lot of designers probably don't really like to work with me because I'm so used to doing all of it. I, I want to sequence the whole book because I find my editing is also about the sequence. You know,
Yeah.
if I'm editing it, the order that it goes in affects the edit. And then I always have ideas about things that are more than designers, like different kinds of paper or different sizes of paper, or let's do some vellum or put a photo on that. And all in service of telling the story
Mhm.
the photographer wants to tell. And I meet with them lots constantly and make keynote edits of the book and send them back and forth. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's a lot of fun. And it's like starting at ground zero, whole different person, whole
Yeah.
different look, whole different size and shape. I worked on several books pretty much since I left there. I've probably done 1 or 2 books a year for Photo Evidence, which is out of France. And the nonprofit publisher, Svetlana Bachevanova, is the main editorial lead. It's her company, her and her husband's. And I've done like 3 different books about the Ukraine with her
Mhm.
that have been more like multiple photographer books, which is like a whole different thing.
Y- I was going to ask you about Ukraine, a war crime, 93 photographers there. So this is another learning curve, I guess,
Yeah.
for Sarah Leen. How you approach this?
That was the first book was War Crimes, and the second one was Love Plus War. And she did an open call to photographers to submit work for possible use in the book, right? In the books.
Mhm.
So we probably got, and not just single images, but also stories. If somebody had a series or something, we welcome that. So then probably more than 100, probably about 120 or so, 30 photographers submitted. We got about 6,000 photos. Um, and then it was me having a huge learning curve about Ukraine and their history
Mhm.
and the history of the conflicts from 2011, 12 on,
Mhm.
to understand. This first book was from 2022, from the invasion
Mhm.
and forward to present. Uh, so I had met this young woman. She was going to school at the University of Missouri Journalism School, where I went to school, at the Missouri Photo Workshop, which I attend generally every year and also teach at. And she was one of the students who was helping work on running it. And she's from Ukraine, Arinka Hromotska. And I was just starting to work on this. And I was thinking the whole time, it's like, why am I doing this book? I'm not Ukrainian,
Mhm.
but I need somebody who's Ukrainian to work with me. I can't just do this, even studying up and stuff. It's not good. It's not a good enough. So I talked to Svetlana about bringing her in as like an assistant photo editor. And that was massive help. She could explain things to me. We would look at the edits and she helped me a lot in terms of, I want to get this right. And the different photographers, and she knew some of the photographers and stuff like that. And the photographers were not just Ukrainian. They're Ukrainians, but they're from everywhere. Everybody was going over there, you know,
Mhm.
over the world to cover the first few years. So yeah, it was not entirely, but a bit of a TikTok put together. It was put together in the order of things happening, right? Not entirely. There were key locations where things had happened. Kiev and Bucha and Mariupol. And so there were
Mhm.
sort of sections that, because we had a whole lot of pictures from here or Kharkiv or here. So we put it together in order of, a lot of things were happening all at the same time. So it's not really in order entirely, but it was by location. And then there was we had people, color, black and white, tin types, 2.25, all kinds of formats and styles. And so a lot of, and the people who had done series we would sometimes put those in between the locations of the main battles and the main events. And so, yeah, and it was massive. I feel like I'm a really good editor, except toward the end of editing a book. I get so attached. I'm just as bad as the photographer. I get so attached about the photos. I have a hard time letting them go. Just photographers do. How I kept having to squish it, make it a little smaller, make it a little, you have to get rid of this. So yeah, so I can do some pretty big books, and this is big. It's big, but it needed to be. The next one, Love and War, we had still about the same 90 something photographers, but it was more about like living with war. The war's still going on. It was like living with war. And the kind of the chapters, and we had illustrations, we had all kinds of wonderful things to play with. And that was put together a bit more between love or war. And then she wanted to start all the way back to the Crimea. So it was more historical at the beginning, showing how this war didn't just start in 2022. It's been going on for a decade. So we had the Crimea, and for both books, I knew a lot of photographers who were working over there, and I would recruit them. Because I knew there was all this amazing work out there, and not all of it got submitted. So I would, please, please send your photos, or I'd see something that somebody in particular had done, and I would say, could we have that story? So in the second book, like Lindsay Dario had done a story for the New York Times, and I had worked with her at the Geographic. She sent in that story that we were able to use in that book, and yeah.
Yeah.
So it was quite an experience, It was the first one, War Crimes, was very intense, terrible stuff you have to look at, especially in Bucha, like massacre. So it was very intense. And then the third book is with only Ukrainian photographers through the UAPP, which is a Ukrainian photo organization.
How many hours of sleep you get in a typical day?
I like to sleep. I don't do anything at night. I stop. I try not to do anything at night, maybe some emails, but that's it. I'm not working all night long. I'll work late if we're deadlines, but I love what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I love working with photographers. I love working on books. I love that I'm at my age and this period in my career that I'm still like taking on new challenges. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, sometimes I don't know what about this book? And that challenge, the book challenge is a challenge for me every single time. But I like being challenged, and have to figure it out with a team, with the photographer, with the editor, the publisher. And and I love seeing books and they give me ideas. That's why I have so many books that, oh, wow, that's cool. That would be beautiful to think about sometime if it's appropriate for the book. So I'm really lucky, and I love teaching. I get so much pleasure in seeing somebody else's success. Your success is my success. So I always used to say at the Geographic too, when I was the photographer now, okay, I've worked with this person for months and here's their show and they're going to show it and they're going to talk it through. And I feel mom, I'm like mom, and this is my child and they're in the talent show. And I hope they remember how the dance steps. And I hope and you're sitting there like cheering them on inside you. And then they get this reward. And I get my reward because they got we did this together. And it's like very special relationship.
You have the best job in the world, Sarah.
I think I've been very fortunate. And I mean, for me, the person that I am and the kind of person I am and what I like to do, it is the best job for me. This is like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian and take care of animals. So I It's so interesting. I still have animals that I take care of, but that's for
Hmm.
pleasure.
Hmm. What's your secret there, Sarah? Because I talked to some photographers, and almost all of them, they told me, give Sarah, tell her hi, give her greetings, tell her we miss her. Many, many, many there. You make such an impact now being a mentor. What's your big secret there, Sarah?
I don't think I don't think there's a secret. I think I don't know. I think you just have to be a good listener and also figuring out what this person needs to move forward, succeed. Some people might need a push. Some people need petting. Some people need, it's like everybody's different, and just understanding like what their goals are. How can we help you get there? And creating like an environment that's them you,
Hmm.
and challenges them. We have to have challenges to grow, right? You're working out in the gym. It's not
Hmm.
always feels good, but that's how you make muscles. So it's like you have to be challenged, but you also have to be supported. And I think that it's so what I was talking about, like the photographer's success is my success. In a way, that's like selfish because I get so much pleasure out of doing this
Hmm.
and working with people. I don't do it. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun for me.
Hmm.
And I love seeing that growth. I love somebody grow. And if I feel like they feel that way to where
Hmm.
we work together, then gosh, what better
Yeah.
gift is that? You know,
Hmm.
it's the best gift of all. So yeah, I love that because it makes me feel good. Not just them, but me
Hmm.
too. And, I made this new workshop 2 years ago. I was doing a lot of teaching at Maine Media up here and also Santa Fe every year. And through COVID, we did them online. And then I team teach at Eddie Adams Workshop and team teach at the Missouri Florida Workshop. But I felt I took a break for like a year. I still did Eddie Adams in Missouri, but I took a break
Hmm.
at the other two places because I'm teaching people about editing. That's my
Hmm.
thing. That's the only thing I'm good at actually anymore. So I want to teach them about organizing and editing their work and things about portfolio reviews and pitching and stuff like that. I was doing it pretty much the same. The two places that I worked at, it's like you just put out your information that you're going to do this workshop on their website, and then anybody can apply. And so I wanted to curate the workshop. I wanted to pick people whose work I was interested in and who I felt like I could help. With another woman, Jennifer Fish, who she had been in my workshops before. And she and another woman, they said, you should do your own workshop outside of these organizations. And I thought, I don't know, maybe. I didn't jump on the idea because I thought, well, then you have to do all the things about housing and
Hmm.
feeding people, et cetera. So there's an Airbnb up the road from me. And I talked to I know the woman's neighbor who got here most of the year, but about what going
Hmm.
in and looking at it and thought, okay, I could fit like maybe 9 people in this house,
Hmm.
but everybody has to share a room. And I immediately knew I wanted to do just women. And I wanted to create this like house for women and this workshop
Hmm.
for women. And not so much that I would teach things any differently, not really, but just so they would bond as a group
Yeah.
differently
Hmm.
than if they were men, because now they're all living together. And then I have a friend who does workshop, Carrie Payne Staley, up Damascata. She's been doing workshops up here a long time. And I asked her, how do you feed people? She doesn't have them live together, but she knew a woman and her husband, and he was a chef and she was a sous chef, but she's also editor of a local magazine. And so I talked to them and and got them they'll feed us for a week. They come up here and stay here, you know,
Hmm.
and they'll cook 3 meals a day, you know.
Hmm.
And so solving those two things made it possible. to do it the way I like to do it. And then we just put it out there, and you have to apply with a project.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jen and then I had Kathy Moran, who's used to be at the Geographic, who also lives up here now. Then we go through everybody's projects and read about them, and we pick 9 people. And then we talk to most, if I don't know them already, there's a lot of people I know, or they've taken these workshops, but not all of them. And then I give one international scholarship to somebody who lives out of the country. So all they have to do is get themselves here. And sometimes I give a half a scholarship. If I could do this for free, I would do it for free. It's just 1 week, and it's a beautiful time here. And the women just, oh my gosh, they're all like best friends at the end of the week. And they're still on WhatsApp all the time. And WhatsApps, and they're WhatsApping all the time. And I'm arranging a Zoom for everybody in January. So I try to get together and keep in touch and help people and show work that you're doing. And it's great. I love it. So we'll do our 3rd one this summer if we get people, but yeah, it's great. It's really fun.
Always looking for new challenges, Sarah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. While I'm able, I'm going to just keep doing it.
That's amazing.
So
So this is 1 week long, and they will come with their own project.
yeah.
Because in the Eddie Adams workshop, you will give them an assignment
Yes.
for the weekend.
They have
It's different.
yes, it's different. And also in Missouri, they have to find a story. So Eddie, because it's very short, there's only like a couple of days of photography, and it's amazing what these students produce in a short amount of time. I'm telling you. And then in Missouri, you'll find a story. It's in a different town in Missouri every year, and you have to go find a story and pitch it. So that's part of the process. The teaching is finding a story and pitching it to your team, and then going and photographing it. And then we edit and put together a slideshow for it. Myself. It's usually an editor and a photographer on the team who's going to be there for the week. And we each get about 8 to 10. Same with Eddie. You get 10 photographers.
And have an amazing time, because I saw the after pictures.
Yes.
You guys having a very, very good time.
Yeah. It's very condensed, very late night working. They keep those students busy every minute because they have a lot of guest speakers. They have portfolio reviews. This is Eddie Adams. They have a lot of portfolio reviews on Saturday night, Sunday night. So they stay up late. Sometimes we're getting together with them after the portfolio reviews, which we might just, the only time they're available to meet with us is when they should be sleeping. Practically, we'll have them up till 1 or 2 in the morning sometimes. I figure, okay, it's only like 4 or 5 days, 4 days. You can sleep when you go home. Yes.
Last thing, Sarah, a photographer comes up who wants to make a new story, or maybe he has already a story and he wants to make a book. What's the first common mistake you see that they still have to learn?
Good question. Let's see. I think thinking about, so if it's a story they have or something they've done, thinking it could be good, but thinking about the market for it, right? Have they thought of, I'm doing this and I think this is a story that I've been working on and I'm not done yet and I'd like to get some support for it. And I think this is a perfect story for Smithsonian Magazine. People don't think about that. They're just doing it. And they're not thinking about where it could go. Or I think this would be great for The Guardian or some other New York Times, and this particular section in the New York Times or something. Who are you thinking or Audubon Magazine? Who is the audience? I think that's key for editorial. And also, a lot of people think, oh, I think this would be great for National Geographic. But National Geographic just did that story 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So I haven't done their homework in terms of where it might go. And so a magazine story doesn't have to be as big. And now if it's a book, it's like, why does it need to be a book? Do you have enough here? Is this the right time in your career to try to do a book? Some people don't do, they work on a project 3, 4 years and then they're ready to do a book, 6 months.
Yeah.
But it could still be 6 months, but it's a different kind of a book, smaller book. Also, I don't think they've done some research on what it's going to take, all the things about doing a book. There's a woman, Mary Virginia Swanson, who I sit at her feet, and every time she speaks, I learn something. She is amazing. She has the market, everything. She did a book called, I think it's in its third printing, of about publishing your photo book, and it's the Bible. Anything you want to know about making a book, it's in there. And I have her come as a guest speaker for my workshops, my female perspectives workshop. And she's just a wealth of information on not just bookmaking, but collectors and galleries and all kinds of stuff that the market for photography. So thinking about that and the money with books, how are you going to raise the money? Do you have anybody who's interested in it? Do you know what it's going to take to raise the money and then distribute and ship and everything? Are you doing it yourself? I think there's a lot of that. And if it's something, I think that I like to say there's the personal and the universal. The personal is that set of photos that you've just made, that whether it's like you were interested in this topic or these people or this landscapes or whatever it is. But how do you get me to care about what you care about, And sometimes that's because I can relate to it, which is the universal. The universal is where we relate. So if it's about aging, I can relate to aging. My parents were older. I'm getting older. It's a place where everybody's parents are getting older. You can connect to something. Aging is the big idea, the universal. And what's the story underneath it? And the story is often the personal, which is not necessarily it's about me, but it's about what I am seeing and interested in and want to show you. And how does it connect up? Because the universal is where you can sell it. That's what the newspapers or the publications are going to be thinking about, is that connection to their audience, finding it. And I think that's really important to be thinking about. But, there's exceptions to every single thing I'm saying too. And there's exceptions to it. You could be Vivian Meyer, who spent her whole life photographing. She was a nanny in New York City and photographing black and white, never showed it to anybody. And now how many books have been done about her and her work since then? So there's always, it's different for everybody. Like Van Gogh, nobody bought any of his paintings. So most people don't want to be like that. They want to put it out while they're alive and enjoy that. But there's so many things. There's a lot of paths. Books are just one path, actually. There's a lot of digital publishing. There's exhibitions, installations. There's tons of ways to be. And most people can't afford to live just editorially. You're going to have to do something else. You might have to do commercial jobs. You might have to do weddings. You might have to teach. Most of it are there.
Be a waiter.
What? Pardon me? What?
Or be a waiter for a time.
Yes. I mean, yeah. I was a bartender. I was a good bartender.
You can make cocktails, Sarah.
I used to be able to very fast too.
I learned something new today about you.
But not anymore. Now I need a book. Yeah.
Sarah, is there like a big mistake you ever made in your life, but ended up teaching you something very important?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. I'd have to spend a little more time thinking about that. I'm sure there's many, but I was saying about how doing that legislative photography at first, I was like, no. I think that, I think maybe the lesson for me is often no doesn't get me anywhere. No is closing the door before, or not even, it's like not opening the door, right? It's like there's something back there and you're invited in and you think, no. But then it stops, then everything stops saying no. So saying yes is much more interesting life than saying no. Saying yes, even if you're not sure. Like my first year away from the Geographic, I said yes to a lot. Anything I'd say yes because that maybe I didn't even want to do it very much, but I would say yes because I know that door leads to another door. And I think that's
Mhm.
for me. Yeah. Yeah. The only problem with yes is if you're too busy, you overcommit, right? You're committed,
Mhm.
which I think can happen to me. But yes is just going to be a much more interesting life than no. And you're going to learn things and you
Mhm.
don't know. I was just at this MFA retreat, and in terms of talking to some of the students there, stuff, it was interesting how often people would say, no, I, that's not what I'm doing. No. And I'd be like, give it a minute. Don't say no just right away. Don't let that be your default position. You your default position maybe should be, oh, let me think about that. I'm going to think about
Mhm.
that and
Mhm.
take a chance. Say yes sometimes, even if you don't think it's maybe the perfect thing.
Mhm. And write them down on a piece of paper. If not,
Yeah.
you will have too many commitments.
Yes. Yes. Keep a list.
Sarah, so I know 3 cats now: Zuzu, Buzzer, and a very, very young new addition,
Bean.
Bean.
Bean. His name is Bean.
Bean. Who of the 3 would you give the role of a creative consultant? Who would be the better choice?
Zuzu, she's my girl. She's very like fussy and has definite ideas about her comfort and everything. So she would be a good critic, right? She'd be the
Mhm.
best critic, critical eye. Buzz is like Mr. Chill. He's Mr. Cool. Everything's okay with him. It's all good.
Mhm.
So he is like maybe most fun to be with, but not critical if you are looking for
Mhm.
that kind of feedback. And then he's only 6 months old and he's just a wild child right now. We're still learning like who he's going to be, but he's pretty chill, but he's troublemaker. They're like such troublemakers when they're young. They break things.
Mhm.
They break stuff. My friend said you can have
Mhm.
cats or you can have things. Yes. But yeah, I think Zuzu, just because she's pretty discerning, she would be saying it's not any good or that
Mhm.
great. Do you have
Sarah,
any plat?
yes, I have 3 little dogs and 2 cats, so I have a tiny
Okay.
zoo at home, but it
I
all works out fantastically well.
love it. That's
I had
great.
hope I had hoped you had Zuzu there on your lap when we do the interview, like a kind
Oh,
of Dr.
oh,
No.
there. I'm in a different part, and they're in the house also. Suzu, yeah, Suzu would walk back and forth. She likes to be center of
Mhm.
attention.
Sarah, and with all of this, I think we are there. I think we had an amazing talk, and I have to let you get on with the more pressing matter: is putting on the garden gloves and putting those
Yeah,
daffodils in the
yeah.
garden.
That's done.
And I
It's
want to
it's
see the
home
picture.
now. Yes, I'll send you a
Mhm,
right
mhm.
of the gardens. Yes.
Sarah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, getting to know you a bit better. Your amazing energy and the smile. Give greetings to your husband, to the 3 cats, and let's keep in touch.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful to
Mhm.
speak to you on such a wide range of ideas and topics, and really appreciate you,
Yeah,
you taking the time.
it was amazing, Sarah. Have a nice evening still, and we see each other around.
I hope so.
Soon.
Bye bye.
Bye. And that was my conversation with Sarah Leen, folks, someone who has spent a lifetime not only making photographs, but helping others understand what images are really saying. If you enjoyed this conversation, you'll find links back below to Sarah's work, her teaching, and the Visual Thinking Collect. And if you like more conversations like this one, please subscribe on YouTube here. You can also listen to the Camera Cafe show, of course, on your audio podcast, and sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date with upcoming guests. Thanks for spending time with us today. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep shooting, and of course, keep moving your own photography forwards. Adios.